Welcome to If You Love This Planet. I'm Dr. Helen Caldecott, and in this program we talk about the greatest medical and environmental threats to all life, such as nuclear weapons and nuclear power, global warming, ozone depletion, toxic pollution, deforestation, and many other social and political issues that relate to global well-being. So if you love this planet, keep listening. Hello and welcome to If You Love This Planet. My guest today is Arnie Gunderson, an energy advisor with Fairwinds Associates, a company who provide research, analysis and paralegal services around environmental and energy issues. Arnie Gunderson has 39 years of nuclear power engineering experience, and during his nuclear industry career, Arnie managed and coordinated projects at 70 nuclear power plants around the United States. He currently speaks on television, radio and at public meetings on the need for a new paradigm in energy production. An independent nuclear engineering and safety expert, Arnie provides testimony on nuclear operations, reliability, safety and radiation issues to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, congressional and state legislatures and government agencies and officials throughout the US, Canada and internationally. Arnie Gunderson, welcome to If You Love This Planet.
Hi, thank you for having me, Helen.
Well, Arnie, things are going from bad to worse, right, at Fukushima?
They're certainly not getting any better.
But Arnie, did they know right at the beginning that there was a meltdown within the first few hours in Unit 1? Did they sit on that data and cover it, or did they not know?
I think there's three agencies involved. I think the Japanese on the scene wanted to believe the best. Yeah. And I've seen that at Chernobyl, and I saw that at 3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
And, when you have two instruments, one is awful and one is good, you believe the one that's good. But pretty quickly, I think at management levels, they knew things were really bad. But moving up the chain through the government became a real problem there. The second agency involved was the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they have a charter to promote nuclear power. So I don't think we were going to get a very strong statement out of them early on. And then the last one is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and it's now apparent that they knew and didn't tell.
Why? Why?
Well, behind the scenes, we know from Wall Street Journal yesterday that there was private meetings at the ambassador level where the United States was telling Japan that you're about ready to lose northern Japan. So that didn't come from the State Department. It obviously came from the NRC. So the NRC knew but chose not to tell.
Why?
Oh, I think it's the same thing, Helen. I think it's promoting nuclear power.
They are evil. I can't say anything else. Look, in medicine, you have to have informed consent from a patient about every procedure you do, and you have to tell them what could happen, that you might rupture their esophagus, they might develop peritonitis. If, the tube goes through the esophageal wall or whatever, you have to be honest. That's now legal. And yet here we have an industry which is pouring radiation into the atmosphere and the water, damaging people's genes for the rest of time. And they're lying, Arnie, they're lying. They can't, it's almost beyond my belief as a doctor to imagine how these people can be so wicked.
Well, they also turned off, the EPA here in the States, turned off the radiation monitors.
Yeah.
And we're discovering now that the air in Seattle, compared to the air in Tokyo, it was only half. There was almost half as much radioactive tiny particles called hot particles in the air in Seattle as it was in Tokyo, and yet we're turning off the United States radiation detectors.
Why is the Environmental Protection Agency turning off the monitors?
Well, I wish I had a secret memo, but I think you've hit it on the head that there's a lot of industrial
Sabotage.
people who are concerned that they don't want this thing to frighten people. But in fact, I mean, you understand hot particles, and the air over Seattle was loaded with hot particles, as it was over Tokyo in April and May.
Okay, so Annie, explain to the audience what is a hot particle and what is it composed of, and what can it do once it gets into the body?
Well, it's very small. It's smaller than the thickness of a hair, but that has a lot of radioactive atoms in it. And what can happen is it can get ingested through saliva, which is why everybody was supposed to water their spinach, but it can also get inhaled and stick in your lung. And in either case, it's got a charge. The other word for these, Helen, is fuel fleas.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're charged and they jump.
Do they jump?
Yeah. You'll see them jump to a charged surface. So these fuel fleas or hot particles have made their way across the Pacific, and at least the data for the Pacific Northwest indicates very high concentrations. About the average person in Seattle, well, the average person in Tokyo breathed in about 10 hot particles a day, and the average person in Seattle breathed in 6. So there really, despite the ocean in between, there really wasn't much difference.
So are they composed of plutonium or I mean, what are the elements in the hot particles, Arnie?
Well, we're seeing plutonium, americium, and uranium, which are very heavy. And we're also seeing strontium and cesium, which are quite heavy but not as heavy, and all of which emit a very powerful, either a beta ray or an alpha particle, and they slam into the internal tissue and disgorge their energy in a very small area. But they do it and do it and do it again and again and again as they decay. So it's an irritant in your lung or an irritant in your bowel or in your pancreas.
Or liver.
Somebody's wind up going there.
Bone, yeah.
Yes, correct. And so that constant irritation over time can cause a cancer.
Well, the truth is, if you inhale 1/1,000,000th of a gram of plutonium, and it stays in one place in your lung, and it does for, months or years, irradiating a very small volume of cells, you're going to get cancer. But it takes, 15 to 60 years for the cancer to develop for you to cough up your first amount of blood.
Well, I think that's what the industry was counting on. By turning off the monitors and saying everything's fine, they realized that 30 years from now or 10 years from now, if you get a cancer, it's impossible to trace that back to Fukushima. So it was a good way of, like an ostrich sticking her head in the sand, just hoping it would blow over.
I can't believe it. It's like having a patient in the ICU, in the intensive care unit, turning off the monitors and saying, we don't really want to know what's happening to this patient. We'd rather not, It's just, it's beyond my capacity as a physician, Arnie, having taken the Hippocratic Oath, to understand what these characters think they are flaming well up to. Now, what I want to know from you, Arnie Gunderson, because you're on CNN, you're on all sorts of television programs, is there a rising tide of deep concern and indeed anger amongst the American people about this? This cover-up.
I think in the United States, more and more people have become concerned, especially in the last week.
Yeah.
In addition to the doubling of the radiation estimate, and it's actually more like tripling, Helen, because they doubled what was released in the first week and are now comparing that to what was released.
Doubled the estimates.
The estimate. All of the detectors were blown to smithereens.
So it's all total estimates. They haven't a clue how much got out or is still getting out, right?
That's correct.
They have no idea. So how can they estimate if they have no monitors? They don't know what's happening, and then they find, oh my God, we've had a meltdown. Oh my God, we've had another meltdown. How can they possibly estimate how much radiation escaped and is escaping into the air and water? How can they?
Well, I think the difference between this accident and Chernobyl is that scientists have the internet and they can be independent and share information.
Yeah.
We're seeing people are sending us automotive air filters from Japan.
Yeah.
And we're examining those in the lab. And the Fukushima air filters are so incredibly radioactive that I hope the mechanics are wearing gloves when they're working on it.
Oh, my God.
And we're seeing, even in Tokyo, the air filters in Tokyo are 30 times less radioactive than Fukushima, but they're still highly radioactive. So,
and what elements have they got? What are you measuring? The strontium, the cesium, the plutonium, the americium, or not? Or just you are?
All of that.
And
well, initially, the first swipe is hot particles, and then once we find the hot particle, we can use a scanning electron microscope to hone in on it and determine exactly what element it is. And we've seen a witch's brew, the cesium-134, 137, strontium, etc. So they clearly were in the air in April and May because we've got the evidence now in the form of automotive air filters.
Okay, so now, and then I read during the last week, Arnie, that the Japanese government have decided that people can eat the radioactive food because they need to keep their farmers settled and in business and keep them happy so people can eat the radioactive food. Did you read that report too? Yes,
and the same with the school children, where they just suddenly said school kids can get what industrial workers can get. It's absurd, and it's unconscionable.
Yeah.
I was on the radio the very first week saying that they should evacuate pregnant women and young children out to 40 kilometers at least. Yeah. And, in fact, they started at 10 and eventually got to 20. So they clearly did not want to provoke a panic. I think in their mind it is better to deal with the medical issues a year or 10 out than it is to lose money this year.
So is it money? I mean, there's always a statement, you shouldn't cry fire in a crowded theatre, or you'll create panic and people, trample over each other trying to get to the exit and kill each other in the process. Is it that sort of dynamic that they didn't want to create panic, A, or B, is it because they not wanted people to know so that their investments, which are absolutely huge in nuclear in Japan and the United States, would not be threatened?
I think both. I'm conscious when I'm on CNN or when I'm on this show. I try to temper my advice so it doesn't create a panic, but yet I think you have to be informed at the same time. And if things are really bad, an informed population needs to know that. And that didn't happen, with the exception of, probably two or three of us, me and Dave Lockbaum from Union of Concerned Scientists and one or two others. All of the experts who were being paid by the industry wound up saying, well, it's not going to be a big problem.
They were lying.
They're kicking the can down the road, Helen. They were saying that 10 years from now we'll figure it out.
They're lying. They need to be indicted and jailed, obviously. That's what I would say as a physician. But let's get on to the next thing, Arnie. Here we are in the middle of the accident. We now learn that units 1, 2, and 3, which you predicted all along, have actually melted down. That unit 4 is very unstable with that huge fuel pool on top of the building full of huge amounts of radioactive materials, and the building is tilting. We have the molten fuel in units 1, 2, and 3 hitting the concrete floor. Possibly there could be a hydrogen explosion. We have the possibility of an aftershock, a big earthquake. Can you just sketch the possibilities of how another major accident could occur, and now the winds have turned and they're blowing south over Japan and the rains are coming? Just sort of outline, illustrate the possible scenarios that could occur from now on, Arnie Gunderson.
Well, I think Unit 1 probably can't get any more worse than it is.